October 3, 1944. The Italian mud had turned to paste under endless rain, and somewhere between the American lines and German positions, a dog carried secrets that could end the war 6 months early, or bury 10,000 men in the Apennine Mountains. Private First Class Tommy Brennan didn't know any of this when he spotted the muddy mutt limping through the ruins of San Pietro. He just saw another piece of Italian misery to mock. The 19-year-old from Brooklyn had been in Italy for 3 weeks, hadn't fired his rifle once, and compensated for his fear by playing tough with anything weaker than himself. When the small German Shepherd mix approached his unit's breakfast line, tail tucked but eyes hopeful, Brennan saw an opportunity to entertain his squad. "Look at this," he laughed, grabbing a can of meat from his K-ration. He held it high, making the exhausted animal stand on, its hind legs spinning in desperate circles. "Dance for the Nazis, you worthless mutt!" The dog, ribs visible through matted fur, tried again and again to reach the food, whimpering softly. Brennan's squad laughed nervously, the kind of laughter men make when they're uncomfortable but don't want to seem soft. He finally threw the can into a puddle of diesel fuel, watching the starving animal try to lick the meat while gagging on petroleum. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, take a moment to subscribe, because every week, we uncover the stories of how intelligence, courage, and sometimes the smallest details change the course of history. What Private Brennan didn't notice was the jeep that had stopped 50 yards away. Inside sat Major General Mark Wayne Clark, commander of the Fifth Army, watching through field glasses, his jaw clenched, not because he was particularly fond of animals. Clark was known as a hard man who'd ordered artillery strikes on medieval monasteries if Germans might be inside. He clenched his jaw because he recognized that dog. More specifically, he recognized the worn leather collar barely visible under the mud, a collar that contained a hidden compartment, a compartment that at this very moment held coordinates for German artillery positions along the Gothic line. The dog's name was Luciano, though only 3 people in the entire Allied force knew this. For 6 months, he had been wandering between the lines, appearing to be another war refugee, another starving creature in a country full of them. Italian partisans fed him behind German positions. He would disappear for days, then show up near American camps. To everyone else, he was invisible, just another casualty of war barely surviving. In reality, he was the most valuable intelligence asset the Allies had in central Italy. The operation had been the brainchild of Captain James Morrison, an OSS officer who'd been a veterinarian before the war. Morrison understood something that most military minds overlooked. Animals could go places humans couldn't. They raised no suspicion. Who would check a stray dog for messages? The Germans had their own messenger dogs, of course, magnificent German shepherds trained in Prussia, wearing official Wehrmacht collars. But Morrison's genius was in the opposite approach. Make the courier look like nothing worth noticing. General Clark had initially scoffed at the idea when Morrison presented it in June. "You want me to trust vital intelligence to a mongrel?" But Morrison had persisted. The dog, found half dead in a bombed-out village, had shown remarkable intelligence. More importantly, he had survived. In a war zone where humans lasted weeks, this animal had survived for years. He knew every path, every safe house, every partisan who might offer food. He was, Morrison argued, already a spy. They were just formalizing the arrangement. The training had taken place in absolute secrecy in a requisitioned villa outside Naples. Only Morrison, Clark, and a radio operator named Sergeant David Chen knew the full scope. Chen, a Chinese-American from San Francisco, whose family had trained military dogs for the Chinese army, worked with Luciano 12 hours a day. The dog learned to follow specific routes, to hide when he heard German voices, to find particular scents that marked partisan safe houses. Most remarkably, he learned to return to different locations based on which scent packet was placed in his collar. Lavender meant return to the American lines. Rosemary meant find the partisans. Diesel, fuel meant danger, hide and wait. By August, Luciano had completed 17 missions. His intelligence had saved an entire battalion from walking into an ambush. He'd carried medical supply requests that kept a surrounded unit alive for 6 extra days until relief arrived. He'd brought back German patrol schedules that allowed OSS operatives to infiltrate enemy positions. Each time he appeared at the American lines looking like any other stray, was quietly collected by Chen or Morrison, and then released again after his collar was serviced. But now, watching Private Brennan pour coffee, grounds on the dog's head while his squad laughed. General Clark faced a dilemma. He couldn't simply order Brennan to stop. That would draw attention to the animal. The entire operation depended on Luciano being invisible, worthless, not worth remembering. Yet the coordinates in that collar needed to reach Morrison within 6 hours, or the planned dawn artillery barrage would hit empty positions while Germans massacred advancing Americans from positions they thought were destroyed. Clark made a decision that would become legendary in intelligence circles, though it wouldn't be declassified. Until 1995, he climbed out of his Jeep and walked toward Brennan's position, but not directly. He made it seem like a routine inspection, stopping to check other soldiers' equipment, asking about ammunition supplies. Brennan didn't notice him approaching until the general was 10 feet away. The private snapped to attention so fast he knocked over his rifle, his face draining of color as he recognized the Fifth Army commander. "At ease, Private," Clark said calmly, his eyes never leaving Brennan's face. "Interesting pet you found." "Sir, it's not, I was just," Brennan stammered. "Just what, son?" Clark's voice carried the kind of quiet menace that made hardened sergeants nervous. "Just wasting food while your brothers are dying 10 miles north? Just entertaining yourself while German 88s are zeroing in on our positions?" He stepped closer, close enough that Brennan could smell the tobacco on his uniform. "Or just showing everyone what kind of soldier thinks torturing starving animals makes him tough." The squad had gone silent. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbled like summer thunder. Clark continued, his voice now loud enough for every soldier in the area to hear. "You know what the difference is between us and them, Private? We're supposed to be better. We're supposed to be the ones who feed the hungry, protect the weak, show mercy. That's why the Italians help us instead of them, because we're not the ones who burn villages and shoot dogs for fun." He turned to the squad sergeant. "This man just volunteered for forward observation duty. Tonight, make sure he gets a good position where he can watch for enemy movement." Forward observation was a death sentence, and everyone knew it. Observers sat alone, ahead of friendly lines, calling in artillery coordinates while German snipers hunted them. The average life expectancy was 3 nights. "Sir," Brennan's voice cracked. "I didn't know. I'm sorry, You're sorry?" Clark wheeled on him. "Tell that to the boys who are going to die tonight because you think war is a joke." Then, in a move that stunned everyone watching, the general bent down and gently picked up the muddy, diesel-soaked dog. Luciano, trained to recognize Clark's scent, went limp in his arms, playing the part of an exhausted stray. "Sergeant Chen," Clark called out. By pure coincidence, Chen happened to be nearby maintaining radio equipment. He jogged over, saluting. "Take this animal to the medical tent. Get him cleaned up and fed. If he survives, he's going to be the Fifth Army's new mascot. We'll call him Lucky." Chen took the dog carefully, his face betraying nothing. Within 10 minutes, he would be in a secure tent, extracting the coordinates from Luciano's collar, coordinates that would be radioed to every artillery battery on the front. As Clark walked back to his Jeep, he stopped one more time near Brennan. "You know what your problem is, Private? You can't tell the difference between worthless and priceless. That mutt you were torturing, he's been living in no man's land for months. He knows every German position, every safe path, every partisan hideout. He's seen more combat than you ever will, and if we were smart enough to follow him instead of mock him, we might actually win this war." Of course, Clark was telling the truth in a way that no one could understand. Within 3 hours, American artillery would rain down on 14 German positions that intelligence had insisted were abandoned. They weren't. The Wehrmacht lost 800 men, 42 artillery pieces, and most importantly, their entire communications network for the central sector. The Gothic line, which German commanders had privately called impregnable, suddenly had a 16-mile gap. Pause. 15,000 characters reached. Say okay to continue. Tentar novamente. Gok Private Brennan never made it to his forward observation post. 2 hours after his encounter with Clark, he was found unconscious in the latrine, apparently having slipped and hit his head. The medical officer, Captain Morrison himself conducting a routine inspection, diagnosed a severe concussion and ordered immediate evacuation to a hospital in Naples. Brennan would spend the rest of the war recovering from mysterious complications that kept recurring whenever discharge papers were discussed. He would never know that General Clark had personally ordered his removal, not as punishment, but as protection. A Soldier who'd publicly humiliated a secret intelligence asset couldn't be allowed near the front where he might be captured and interrogated. The artillery barrage that began at a 400 on October 4th was so precise that German commanders initially believed they had a traitor in their ranks. They were right in a way. They had dozens of traitors, all Italian partisans who fed and sheltered a small dog, attached messages to his collar, and sent him on his way with a pat and a prayer. Each partisan knew only their small part. Feed the dog, attach the message, add the scent packet. They never knew, never, where Luciano went next or what intelligence he carried. This cellular structure, designed by Morrison, meant that even under torture, no single partisan could compromise the network. The breakthrough at the Gothic line should have been impossible. Military historians still study it as an example of perfect tactical execution, never knowing that the key to victory was limping through mud with diesel fuel in his fur. Over the next 6 weeks, Luciano completed 9 more missions. Each time he appeared more worn, more scarred. German patrols had started shooting strays on sight, having noticed that dogs seemed to appear before American attacks. Luciano was hit twice, once by shrapnel that tore through his left ear, once by a bullet that grazed his hip. Chen wanted to retire him after the second wound, but Morrison understood something deeper. The dog would keep going until he couldn't. It was all he knew. The partisan network that supported Luciano was equally remarkable. There was Maria Benedetti, a 60-year-old widow who hid messages in bread loaves she baked for the dog. She would wrap intelligence about German tank movements in wax paper, bake it inside the bread and leave, and it where only Luciano knew to look. There was Giuseppe the Ghost Toretti, a former circus performer who could move through German lines like smoke. He would whistle a specific tune, Puccini's Nessun Dorma, that Luciano had been trained to follow. The Germans never caught him, though they found his whistling so unnerving they posted rewards for the phantom whistler. Most incredibly, there was Anna Rossini, a 14-year-old girl whose father had been executed by the SS. She lived in the ruins of a church directly between the lines, surviving on rats and rainwater, invisible to both armies. Anna became Luciano's primary handler in no man's land. She would treat his wounds with stolen medical supplies, hide him in the church's collapsed crypt when patrols passed, and most importantly, she could read the codes. Her father had been a mathematics professor, and Anna had inherited his gift for patterns. She would decode messages from the partisans, prioritize them, and reorganize them in order of importance before sending Luciano on to the American lines. On November 18th, everything nearly collapsed. A Wehrmacht intelligence officer named Captain Hans Drucker had noticed the pattern. Not the dog specifically, but the timing. American artillery always seemed most accurate 6 to 8 hours after supply convoys arrived at certain sectors. He theorized that someone was observing the convoys and reporting back. He was right, but looking for the wrong thing. He posted snipers to watch for human observers. He sent patrols to search for radio transmissions. He never thought to watch for a limping mongrel. But then Drucker's own German shepherd, a magnificent animal named Kaiser, did something unexpected. During a patrol, Kaiser became agitated, pulling toward a ruins where Luciano was hiding. The two dogs met in what soldiers from both sides would later describe as the strangest encounter of the war. Kaiser, trained to attack, suddenly stopped. He sniffed Luciano carefully, then did something his handler had never seen. He play-bowed, front legs stretched forward, tail wagging. Luciano, exhausted and wounded, managed a weak tail wag in return. Captain Drucker watched this interaction with growing suspicion. Why would his attack dog show submission to a stray? He ordered Kaiser to attack. The dog refused, the first time in his military career. Drucker pulled his Luger, aimed at Luciano, and would have ended the entire operation if not for Anna Rossini. The 14-year-old girl emerged from the ruins, sobbing theatrically, throwing herself over Luciano while screaming in Italian about her only friend, and all she had left of her father. Drucker, who had a daughter the same age in Berlin, hesitated. That hesitation saved not just Luciano, but arguably thousands of American lives. Anna's performance was magnificent. She showed Drucker a collar she had made for her pet from scraps of leather, never mentioning that the decorative brass studs were actually carefully designed to hide microfilm. She produced a ball made of rags that Luciano would fetch, demonstrating how well-trained he was, how he must have belonged to someone before the war. She even showed Drucker tricks, how Luciano could count by barking, how he would prey by putting his paws together. Each trick was actually a trained intelligence behavior, but Drucker saw only a lonely girl and her dog. The German captain made a decision that would haunt him after the war. He gave Anna 3 cans of Wehrmacht dog food and told her to keep her pet away from military areas. As he walked away, Kaiser kept looking back at Luciano, whining softly. Years later, Drucker would write in his memoirs that this moment troubled him more than any battle. The inexplicable behavior of his dog toward that Italian stray. He never knew how close he had come to unraveling one of the war's most successful intelligence operations. The crisis passed, but Morrison knew they were running out of time. Luciano was too well known now, even if no one understood his significance. More dangerously, the dog was dying. The continuous stress, minimal food, and multiple wounds were taking their toll. Chen reported that Luciano's breathing was labored, his gait increasingly unsteady. A veterinary examination revealed advanced malnutrition, 2 broken ribs that had healed incorrectly, and early signs of heart failure. Morrison estimated they had perhaps 2 weeks before the dog could no longer perform his missions. General Clark made the decision to attempt one final operation, the most ambitious yet. Intelligence suggested that Field Marshal Albert Kesselring was planning a massive counteroffensive for December 1st, designed to push the Allies back to the beaches. The details were kept in a safe at a German headquarters in Modena, 30 miles behind enemy lines. No human agent could possibly reach it, but perhaps Luciano could make one last journey. The mission required everything to work perfectly. Partisans would need to get Luciano inside. Modena passed Wehrmacht checkpoints into the headquarters building. Anna Rossini volunteered to accompany him, claiming she was bringing her sick dog to a German veterinarian who had shown kindness to Italian civilians. The cover story was paper-thin, but it only needed to last 6 hours. On November 27th, Anna and Luciano began their journey. The dog could barely walk, so Anna carried him much of the way, her thin arms shaking with effort. At the first checkpoint, a young Wehrmacht private took pity on them, even offering some of his own rations. At the second, they were nearly turned, back until Luciano, in what seemed like a miracle, performed one of his tricks, standing on his hind legs and saluting with his paw. The German soldiers laughed, reminded of their own dogs back home. Inside Modena, Anna located the headquarters, a requisitioned bank building. This was where the plan should have failed. There was no way a civilian girl and a dog could enter such a facility. But Morrison had planned for this. At exactly 1400 hours, partisans detonated a bomb 3 blocks away. As German soldiers rushed to respond, Anna slipped through a door left momentarily unguarded. Luciano, following scent markers placed days earlier by an Italian cleaning woman, led Anna through corridors to a specific office. The safe was locked, of course, but taped to its back, invisible unless you knew to look, was a carbon copy of the counter-offensive plans, placed there by the same cleaning woman who had marked the route. Anna photographed the documents with a camera hidden in a hollow prayer book, the film roll small enough to fit in Luciano's collar compartment. The entire infiltration took 11 minutes. Getting out proved harder than getting in. The bombing diversion had ended, and soldiers were returning to their posts. Anna and Luciano were spotted by a sergeant major who demanded to know what they were doing in the building. Anna broke down crying, claiming she was lost, that she had been looking for the veterinarian, that her dog was dying. Luciano, as if understanding the performance, collapsed on cue, his breathing becoming a terrible wheeze. The sergeant major faced a choice: follow protocol and detain them for interrogation, or show mercy to a child and a dying dog. He chose mercy, personally escorting them out of the building while lecturing Anna about staying away from military facilities. As they walked away, Luciano's legs gave out completely. Anna carried him the rest of the way, tears streaming down her face. Real tears now, because she could feel how light he had become, how each breath seemed to hurt him. They made it back to American lines on November 29th. The intelligence Luciano carried revealed not just the counteroffensive plans, but the entire German order of battle for northern Italy. When the attack came on December 1st, the Allies were ready. What should have been a devastating surprise became a catastrophic German defeat. The Wehrmacht lost 3 divisions, over 100 tanks, and any hope of holding Italy. General Clark visited Luciano one last time on December 3rd. The dog was lying on a medical cot in Morrison's tent, too weak to stand. Chen had been feeding him by hand, drops of water and thin soup, but everyone knew the end was near. Clark, the hard general who'd ordered the destruction of Monte Cassino, knelt beside the cot and gently stroked Luciano's head. "You saved more lives than any soldier under my command," he said quietly. "You walked through hell and never asked for anything but a meal and a kind word." Luciano's tail managed one weak thump against the cot. That night, with Chen holding him and Morrison standing guard, Luciano closed his eyes and didn't open them again. He died at 02:47 on December 4, 1944, his mission complete. The funeral was secret but extraordinary. General Clark, Morrison, Chen, and 17 partisans who had risked their lives to support Luciano gathered in a small cemetery outside the town. Anna Rossini, brought through the lines under special escort, placed wildflowers on the grave. The marker read simply, "Lucky, 5th, Army mascot. He served with honor." Only those present knew the truth of those words. Private Tommy Brennan survived the war, though he never returned to combat. The concussion he suffered had mysteriously affected his trigger finger, making him unable to hold a rifle steady. He was reassigned to supply duties in Naples, where he spent his remaining service distributing food to Italian orphanages. He became known for his kindness to stray animals, always carrying extra rations for the dogs that haunted the supply depots. He never knew why General Clark had really removed him from the front, never understood that his cruelty to a single dog had nearly cost thousands of lives. After the war, Captain Morrison tried to establish a formal military working dog program based on Luciano's success. The proposal was rejected, too unconventional, too difficult to standardize. But Morrison's classified report became required reading at intelligence schools, a masterclass in using unexpected assets. The principle he articulated, that the invisible and worthless could be the most valuable of all, would influence Cold War intelligence operations for decades. Anna Rossini emigrated to America in 1947, sponsored by an anonymous benefactor who turned out to be General Clark. She became a mathematician, eventually working for NASA during the Apollo program. She never spoke publicly about the war, but she kept a photograph on her desk, a blurry image of a small dog, barely visible, walking through ruins. When colleagues asked about it, she would simply say, "He was the bravest soul I ever knew." The Gothic line breakthrough shortened the Italian campaign by an estimated 6 months. Historians credit superior Allied intelligence, never knowing that this intelligence often came wrapped in muddy fur, carried by an animal that everyone saw but no one noticed. In military archives, there are references to Source Luciano in dozens of operations, always credited with exceptional accuracy. Only a handful of people ever knew that Source Luciano had 4 legs and a tail. Hans Drucker, the German intelligence officer who had come so close to discovering the truth, spent years after the war wondering about that encounter. His dog Kaiser never forgot it either. For the rest of his life, whenever Kaiser encountered a stray, he would show the same submissive, playful behavior he had displayed with Luciano. Drucker wrote in his memoir, "In war we are taught to see enemies everywhere. Perhaps that is why we missed what was right in front of us, not because it was hidden, but because it was too simple, too pure to be part of our complicated cruelties." Today, in a small museum in Naples dedicated to the Italian campaign, there is a display case that most visitors pass without stopping. It contains a worn leather collar, a few black and white photographs, and a medal, the Distinguished Service Cross, awarded posthumously to an intelligence asset of extraordinary value. The placard mentions only that this asset saved countless Allied lives through repeated journeys into enemy territory under conditions of extreme danger. It doesn't mention that the asset had 4 legs, that he loved belly rubs, or that he died believing his only job was to find his way home. If stories like this remind you what quiet courage can accomplish when everyone else is looking for something louder, subscribe now, because the next one will take you even deeper into the forgotten heroes who won the war in ways no one expected. In the end, the boy from Brooklyn who tormented a stray learned mercy, the general who trusted a mongrel changed history, and a dog nobody wanted became more valuable than entire divisions. They called him lucky, but luck had nothing to do with it. It was love, trust, and the kind of intelligence that hides in plain sight, walking through hell on 4 tired paws, carrying secrets that would save the world, one journey at a time.